Contrary to popular opinion, I do not love every horror movie that comes out. I don't even like every horror movie that comes out. That's just a fact. And unfortunately, I'm here today to tell you I still don't like every horror movie that comes out nowadays. Everybody, Nick here at the Lost River Drive-In. I'm here to give you my review for Insidious: The Red Door, what is being billed as the final chapter of the Insidious franchise, or at the very least, the final chapter for Patrick Wilson and his family. You guys know I like the Insidious movies. I think the first one is great. I think that the second one is solid. The third one, The fourth one, pretty good. So I went into this with at least mildly high expectations. I knew the original family was coming back. I really wanted to believe that this movie was going to be great. And unfortunately, it wasn't. Now, I am an eternal optimist. I always have been, I always will be. So I will start this review off with the positives. I also want to say, there will be no spoilers in this review. You guys know how I am. I don't get into that. Not when a movie just comes out. So if you haven't seen it and you plan to see it, don't worry, I will spoil nothing for you. So starting off with the positives for Insidious: The Red Door, I have to say the original cast, the entire original family steps back into their roles seamlessly. I think that they all work really well off of each other, and that was true in the first and second movie. They really do feel like a family. You really do buy their struggles. You really feel for them. You care for them. In this movie, it's no different. I think Ty Simpkins, who plays the role of Dalton, he is especially good in this movie. As a kid actor, there are moments where you're like, in the first two Insidious movies, but he's a kid actor. We've kind of come to accept that and almost expect it sometimes for kid actors. Not so much nowadays, but it has been true more often than not. But he really has turned into a fine actor, and he does a really, really good job in this movie. I really like him. He's this angsty teen, but he plays that really well. Patrick Wilson is phenomenal in this movie. Like, I'm not even going to sugarcoat it. He is great in this movie. And I don't know why I said sugarcoat, because it's true. He's awesome in this movie. I think this is his best performance in the series, hands down, bar none. I really like the range of emotion that he plays with. The relationship between he and Dalton is really, really, you can feel the tension there. It's palpable. They are at each other's throats, but you can tell underneath it all, they both love each other. There's this barrier there. And obviously we know what that is. If you watch the trailers, they don't really remember their past. And that's kind of what it is. It's like this unspoken thing that at times you can tell they connect and they feel like the other one wants to say something and it might spark something in them, but it doesn't happen. And that relationship is really cool. I love the tension there. I wish we would have got more of Rose Byrne. She only gets a couple scenes in the movie. She's good in what she has. She's always good in pretty much every role I've ever seen her in, but she's great as the mom in these movies. I really liked her in this movie, but I wanted to see more of her. Overall, what this movie plays with is the family dynamic. It plays with the emotional aspects of things. It plays with the drama, not so much the horror. This is more psychological than supernatural. And as someone who, I love me a good psychological horror film. And I'll get into negatives after this, but I just want to put that out there. It's a little more psychological. So don't think I don't like psychological horror films when I talk about that in a minute. So that's all good. Patrick Wilson's directorial debut is really, really solid. I thought there was some really good camera work here. Now, obviously, I'm not a pro at this, as Christian will make jokes about. So saying you like this or that when you don't really know what they're doing, it's kind of hard to say, but I'm just saying aesthetically. Like the color palette, the muted tones here, I really like it. I like some of the settings. The Further looks as good as ever, and I love the sound design when they're in the Further. I really did dig that. There's a shot in the opening of the movie that's like this 360. The camera does a 360. It's like nauseating, but it's also really, really like intriguing at the same time. So that's a mixed bag there, but a really cool technique. Patrick Wilson does great in this movie. I think directorially, this is a great debut. I hope he gets more work because I really do think he does a really good job here. And, finally, it's a nice conclusion. It's a nice conclusion for the original family. It's a nice conclusion. If this truly is the end of the series, it would be a nice way to send it off. The end of this movie does tie things up pretty nicely, And that was cool. That was definitely cool to get you wanted a satisfying conclusion to the movie and to the story. And I feel like this movie more or less delivers that. But now let's get into the negatives about Insidious the Red Door. First and foremost, I did mention that I wanted more Rose Byrne, and I will hold by that. I think that she was probably, we say that Josh and Dalton were the focal points of the first two movies, but I don't know. We really got to live through her in those two movies and the terror she was feeling and the things she was experiencing. So I almost felt like the movie was done a disservice by not having her featured more. But again, just my opinion. On top of that, the psychological horror aspect of this movie, while intriguing and while something I really like when done well, and it's not done poorly here, it's not Insidious. I mean, let's just call a spade a spade. And it's certainly not Insidious if you're billing this as the final chapter that's going to tie everything together. That is where it really kind of just bumps up against what you have and what you should get and what you expect, and they're just butting heads the entire time. And while I liked that they took a little bit different of an approach, normally you do that when a franchise is getting long in the tooth. You want to keep it going, so you want to breathe some new life into it. Not when you are going, okay, this is the last one. If you liked the first two, you're really going to love this one because it's just not the same as the first two. So while it's an interesting tact, overall, it doesn't feel like Insidious. And I think the biggest sin for any horror movie, especially a paranormal horror movie, at least in my opinion, it wasn't scary. I mean, it just wasn't scary. There was one moment that mildly made me jump, and it had to do with a bed sheet. That's it. There was nothing else in this movie that even gave me remote tension. And unfortunately, some of it was spoiled in the trailer. There's an MRI sequence in the trailer that probably could have been effective had it not been in the trailer. So I wasn't scared. Now, I have to be fair. I don't think anything after the first movie in this series has truly been scary. And I think that once you get that and you have that initial reaction to that first movie, the novelty kind of wears off. And maybe that's not a knock on the movie. Maybe that's to be expected. Once you see it and you see it done well, it's hard to ever have that replicated. So it's not necessarily a negative against the movie. It's just a bummer. I want to be scared. And I'm finding it more and more now as I get older that just not a lot scares me. What scares me nowadays is real problems. Like getting old and dying and being alone forever. So guys, at the end of the day, Insidious the Red Door is a mixed bag. While it does really well with the human elements and the family dynamic and the story, it is not very scary. It a lot of times doesn't feel like an Insidious movie, and through midway through this movie, at multiple portions, you're just going, what are we doing here? We're kind of meandering a little bit. We're kind of beating around the bush. The third act comes up quickly in the sense that it's there and it's gone. And that was a bummer. I really feel like if this is going to be the end, stretch that third act out a little bit. Let's really get wild here. They just don't. They really don't. There's nothing in this movie that you haven't seen before. I'll just say that, pretty much. Now, there are some cameos here. I won't spoil them. That's kind of another mixed to negative thing for me. I wish there was more. That's all I'll say about that. Overall, this movie is definitely a mixed bag. I'm going to give it a passing grade. I gave it a 3.5 out of 5 on Letterboxd. I could see myself giving it 3 out of 5 when it's all said and done. This was just my initial reaction after a first watch because it's better than average. It definitely is, just for the competency of the film and the way that the story is told and through these characters. It's just done really well, especially the dynamic between Dalton and Josh. I really, really felt that. As a dad that worries about, being split up from your spouse and raising your child separately, what that could be like in the future. I felt that. That really resonated with me. But overall, yeah, it's a mixed bag. It's fine. Honestly, it's fine. I wish I could sit here and give you this glowing review and tell you Insidious is back, baby. Can't wait for the next movie. I'm not there. It's a pretty muted response for me. Honestly, if it's a little bit better than middle of the road, I guess I can't call it Insidious, which I was doing jokingly, but it's pretty mid, all things considered. So, have you guys seen Insidious the Red Door? Do you plan on seeing it? What did you think? And what are you hoping to get out of this movie? Please discuss all that down below in the comment section. Leave a like on this video, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel, follow me on social media, listen to the You Need a Horror Podcast, the best, the only real horror podcast in the motherfucking game, and don't forget it. This is Nick at the Lost River Drive-In, and I am pulling out.